I was halfway through pulling out tree roots from a backtub toilet when the rain started coming sideways. I didn't stop right away, my gloves were slick, the auger was fighting me, and I'd already quoted the job too low. By the time I stood up to wipe my face, the gutters outside were foaming over like someone had dropped detergent in the sky. The client's kid had their nose pressed to the living room window. "You gonna finish?" the dad asked, barely glancing up from his phone. I gave a noncommittal nod, muttered something about checking the main line, and stepped outside just in time to watch a piece of cardboard float past my boot like a tiny raft. The water was ankle deep, I swore under my breath. This was the third job of the day. I hadn't had lunch yet. My phone was buzzing in my jacket pocket, but I figured it could wait. It couldn't. Let me back up. My name's Joe Marlin, 42, plumber by trade, not by family legacy. My dad was an insurance adjuster who never taught me how to use a wrench without sighing first. I got into this line of work because someone once told me, people always need water and heat, and that turned out to be true. What they didn't tell me was that when people are desperate enough, they remember you exist, and when they're dry and comfy, you're invisible. Our street was one of those older, quiet charm neighborhoods realtors love to pitch. Every house with its own little quirk. Mine had warped baseboards and a garage that leaned a little too far left. Most of the folks on the block were friendly in that tight smile, wave from the mailbox kind of way. We borrowed sugar, not secrets. I lived 2 houses down from the corner in the house I inherited from my uncle, who passed it to me with the kind of shrug that said, "Good luck, kid." I'd been slowly fixing it up in between jobs, but it was a one-man operation. No crew, no van with cartoon mascots or flashy logos. Just me, a rusted-out truck, and a set of Milwaukee tools that had seen better days. And on the Thursday the flood came, nobody had texted me in weeks. It started slow. The forecast said scattered storms. What we got was 3 inches of rain in under 2 hours, with wind that made the street signs bend and garbage bins dance. I'd just finished snaking the pipe and was standing outside the client's house when my phone finally demanded attention. "Missed call, Mom." "Missed call, Rachel, neighbor." Voicemail dug from across the street. "Text Joe, basement's flooding, urgent." Then another. "Text Joe, can you come ASAP?" "Text Ike, if you're home but we're screwed." "Text water's coming in fast, pump isn't working, please." My phone was lighting up like I'd just gone viral. I drove home through 6 inches of standing water. The truck coughed once but kept going, bless its dented heart. Branches littered the road. A for sale sign floated past me like a ghost. When I turned onto my street, I slowed almost to a crawl. The curb was gone. So was most of my front yard. And standing waist-deep in the water near my driveway, wearing a soaked bathrobe and the kind of panicked expression you only see during hurricanes and house fires, was Mrs. Lindell from next door. She waved both arms when she saw me. Joe, thank God, please, I think the water heater's blown. I don't know, there's steam or smoke or something coming out the vent." I parked halfway on the lawn and barely got out before she was grabbing my sleeve. "I called the city, they're not picking up. My son's in Arizona, he says they might shut off our power if it gets bad enough. Can you please just look, just tell me if it's going to explode or something?" I nodded. "First, get inside and shut off the main breaker if you can reach it without touching water. Don't go near anything metal. I'll be over in 5. I didn't even change shoes before heading to my shed to grab my pump and gear. By 5:30, I'd been to 4 houses on the block. None of them had ever hired me before. Rachel, who once lectured me for leaving my truck idling in winter, practically hugged me when I helped her dig out the storm drain with a rake and a piece of PVC. Her husband pretended not to see me, but he was knee-deep in the yard trying to keep mulch from washing into the street, so he didn't have much choice but to nod and let me work. Doug's basement was worse. The sump pump had failed. His teenage daughter was standing on a milk crate with a shop vac nozzle, trying not to cry. I walked in, said nothing, and handed her a flashlight. Then I got to work. "Didn't know you were still plumbing full-time," Doug said as I unplugged the fried pump. "Still am," I said. He scratched the back of his neck. "Should have called you sooner, huh?" I didn't answer, he knew. By 7:30 it was dark and I was soaked through. My hands ached. My boots sloshed. The rain had finally slowed, but the damage was done. Half the street looked like a splash page from a disaster manual: sandbags, towels stuffed under doors, kids crying over ruined toys, sump pumps roaring like generators. And mate. I was the unofficial emergency response team. Nobody cared that I wasn't licensed for electrical. Nobody asked if I was insured to be in their basements. They just wanted help, the kind they'd ignored until it punched through their foundation. I made it back to my place around 8. Just as I was pulling off my gloves, I saw a flashlight beam bouncing down the sidewalk. It was Aaron from 3 doors down, early 30s tech startup guy, usually too busy to wave. Joe, he called out, "Hey, sorry, I know it's late, our basement's filling up. I tried to rent a pump but everywhere, closed or sold out. Can you help us?" I hesitated, my shoulders were screaming, my clothes stuck to my skin, and I hadn't eaten since a granola bar in the truck that morning. But then I looked at him, he wasn't entitled, he wasn't panicking, just overwhelmed, humbled maybe. I nodded, "Give me 10, let me change, I'll bring the backup pump." By the time I finally sat down that night, close to midnight, I'd been in 11 houses. My phone had 16 missed calls, 4 voicemails, one from my mom asking if I was okay, one from my brother who never called unless someone was dead, and one from a number I didn't recognize. I let the last one play on speaker while I peeled off my wet socks. Voicemail. "Hi, Joe, this is Gina. We live on Maple and 3rd. I think your mom might have mentioned us. Anyway, our neighbor said you're a plumber and we're in serious trouble over here. We'd be grateful for any help, even if it's just advice. Please call back." I stared at the ceiling. The fan spun lazy circles, doing nothing for the heat. I was so damn tired. But the flood didn't care. And neither did anyone else, until they remembered I existed. It was 6:22 the next morning when my doorbell rang. I was still on the couch, still damp in places. The towel I'd tossed over the armrest was soaked through, and my knees ached like I'd spent the night in a trench, which, in a way, I had. I didn't get up right away. Whoever it was, they'd ring again. They did. 3 short bursts this time. Not the neighborly kind, the urgent kind. I sat up, my lower back protesting the movement, and reached for the shirt I'd dropped on the floor. It smelled like rust and PVC glue. I didn't care. When I opened the door, it was Marvin Holloway standing there in Crocs and a wet windbreaker, holding a coffee mug like it was a white flag. "Morning," he said. Marvin was the head of our neighborhood association, a retired engineer. He once made a motion to ban fake grass on front lawns, citing aesthetic integrity. He hadn't said more than 5 words to me in the past year. Today, he looked like a man who'd had to crawl through his own crawlspace. "We're organizing a response," he said. "Triage mostly, gutters, drainage, sandbagging the low lots. I've got some volunteers coming. We'd appreciate your guidance." He said guidance the way someone might say intervention, like I was a contractor/priest. "You need tools?" I asked. He glanced down at his coffee. "We need someone who knows where to start." By 7:15, I was standing in Marvin's garage with 4 volunteers and a laminated street map. 2 of them were teenagers from the high school, clearly dragged out of bed by panicked parents. One was Dave, the UPS guy who lived across from the cul-de-sac. The 4th was Carol Zimmerman, who ran the local Facebook group like a digital fortress. She was already live streaming on her phone. "This is Joe Marlin," she said into the camera. "Plumber, neighbor, and all-around hero of the hour. He's going to walk us through what we're up against." I blinked. "Hero." She grinned. "That's what everyone's saying. You helped, what, 10 houses last night?" 11, I muttered. Her phone caught that. "Great." We split the street into zones. Zone A had the lowest elevation and the worst damage. The storm drains had backed up and water was pushing into basements like a slow-moving monster. Zone B was mid-slope but had older piping, mostly clay. Cracks, collapses, root intrusion, a plumber's bingo card. Zone C had minimal damage but paranoid residents. "Start with Zone A," I told them. "Clear the drains, use shovels if you have to. If you see a metal cap that says sewer, don't lift it unless the water's already forced it open." Carol raised a hand. "Why not?" "Because if pressure's built underneath, it'll blow like a geyser. You'll lose your eyebrows." Laughter, nervous but real. I didn't go with them at first. I had my own house to deal with. The basement had held, but barely. My old backup pump, bless its dying heart, had chugged through the night, leaving behind a wet film and the faint smell of motor burn. I waded through the half-inch puddle and checked the corner where I kept the water heater. still dry underneath, for now. On the workbench sat my spare parts box. Washers, valves, gaskets, some copper elbows. I opened it slowly. Only half stocked. The hardware store downtown was probably wiped out already. People always panic by the wrong things. Sandbags and bleach, sure, but no one thinks about sump pump hoses until the water's already inside. I made a list. Couplings. Sealant. 2 check valves. A new pump if I got lucky. Then I headed out. The scene on our street looked like a cross between a block party and a FEMA drill. Neighbors were hauling debris to the curb. Kids in galoshes splashed around like it was a holiday. A guy in a Subaru drove slowly down the middle with his hazard lights on and a shovel sticking out of his trunk. And then there were the people who saw me and suddenly remembered they had plumbing emergencies. Joe, can I grab you for 2 minutes? Hey, real quick, our hot water's out and I think it's electrical, but... Joe, my brother's a contractor in Tampa and he said the whole system might need to be drained. Is that true? I answered as many as I could, told them to shut off the mains if the water got close to the breaker box, told them to avoid flushing if their sewer lines were slow, told them to wait. I couldn't be everywhere. But I was everywhere apparently. At Hannah and Mike's place 2 blocks over, I found real damage. Mike had tried to DIY a sump system with parts from YouTube tutorials and leftover aquarium tubing. It was a disaster. Water had shorted the basement light and the drywall was already blistering. Joe, man, he said, wringing his hands, can you just tell me if we're screwed? I crouched by the water line and looked at the sealant job. You're half screwed, I said, but not doomed. You need a proper pump and a check valve before mold sets in. Can I pay you? I paused. He wasn't offering it the way people usually do, not transactional, not desperate. Just trying to do right. Just cover the cost of parts, I said. I'll put in the labor if I have time later today. His eyes went glassy. Thanks, seriously, I didn't know who else to ask. Back home, I changed into dry socks, downed half a peanut butter sandwich, and checked my phone. 32 unread texts. 7 voicemails. 1 from Gina, the stranger from Maple and 3rd. Hey Joe, I don't want to be a pest, but the water's rising again and we have an elderly tenant downstairs. She's scared. I tried calling emergency services, but no one's answering. We'd really appreciate it if you could come. I set the phone down. Let my head fall into my hands. The thing no one tells you about being needed is that eventually, it stops being flattering. It starts to feel like drowning with other people's hands on your shoulders. I made it to Gina's by 2. The house was a narrow duplex, 1 story on top, finished basement below. Water had begun to creep through the back windows, soaking the carpet and warping the door frames. She met me outside with a towel over her shoulders. Thank you for coming, she said, voice already cracking. I'm not a miracle worker, I said. I know, I just figured you'd be honest. I was. This carpet's a loss. You'll need to tear out everything up to 12 inches above the waterline, maybe more, but the good news is your foundation looks solid, no structural cracks. She exhaled, okay. We moved fast. I helped her tenant, Miss Ellie, gather essentials, set up a temporary pump, rigged a siphon from the laundry drain. When I left, the worst was over. But the neighborhood still wasn't done with me. It was nearing 5 o'clock when Marvin called again. Joe, he said, can you come by the green belt on the east end? We've got a blockage, big one. I was so tired I forgot to answer right away. Joe. Yeah, I said, I'm on my way. By dusk, I'd unclogged 6 storm drains, fixed 2 pumps, installed 1 temporary bypass, and talked 3 neighbors out of breaking their own drywall. And still the requests kept coming. As I walked back to my house, Aaron stepped out of his porch and handed me a wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water. You probably haven't eaten, he said. I took it. Thanks, I said more softly than I meant to. He didn't ask for anything, just gave a small nod and went back inside. That night I stood in my basement again, watching the pump hum like a tired old heart. I knew it wouldn't last much longer. And I knew the storm wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't lonely. It was full of people who suddenly remembered I existed. Of houses that breathed because I kept the water out. and of the quiet click of a pipe sealing properly after years of being ignored. A stack of thank you cards sat on my kitchen table, neatly arranged beside a mug of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Outside, the street still looked like a war zone, piles of debris, warped furniture on curbs, damp insulation peeking out of contractor bags. Inside, my fridge compressor buzzed like life was normal. But I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, and my hands were so swollen I had to use pliers to open a bottle of Gatorade. That morning, someone had called me a community cornerstone. Funny thing was, no one said that back when I was just fixing leaky garbage disposals for $50. It was Saturday now, day 3 since the flood. The storm had moved on, but the aftermath lingered like humidity in a locked bathroom. There was no official aid, yet city resources were stretched, and we weren't the only part of town hit. The mayor's office issued a boilerplate statement about community resilience and assessing infrastructure impacts. In real terms, that meant we were on our own. Carol Zimmerman had taken it upon herself to organize shifts. She created a spreadsheet titled Joe's Task List, which she shared publicly without asking. People were signing up in 3-hour blocks like I was some kind of town doctor. When I saw it, I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I texted her, "Please take my name off the title." She replied with a heart emoji and changed it to Neighborhood Help Schedule, which was technically better, but not by much. At around 8:30, I got a knock on my side door, not the front where people usually go, the side where neighbors used to leave packages when I wasn't home. It was Rachel, wearing jeans tucked into her rain boots, holding a tray of what looked like lemon bars. "I brought these for you," she said, and then added quickly, "and for whoever's helping you. I figured you might be feeding volunteers." I opened the door wider. No volunteers here, just me. Her eyes flicked past me into the kitchen, like she half expected to see an army of muddy teenagers scrubbing pipe fittings. "I heard about how much you've been doing." I nodded. "It's been a long week." She shifted, awkward now. "Listen, I know we haven't really talked since the driveway thing, but if you need anything, tools, errands, food, just ask. I mean it." I wanted to say, where was this energy when you called the HOA because my truck had rust spots? But I didn't. I said, "Thanks for the bars." She left a minute later and I stood staring at the tray. I wasn't even hungry, but I ate 2 anyway. They were decent. Around noon, Tyson, a high school senior who lived down the block, showed up on his bike, panting. "My grandma's boiler is making this weird screeching noise," he said, not even bothering with hello. "She says it smells like toast." I was already grabbing my jacket. Toast smell near an old boiler usually means overheating wires or a failing igniter, not something you ignore. At the house, Tyson's grandma, Miss Geneva, was sitting in her recliner, knitting like it was any other day. "Don't let him worry you," she said when I walked in. "It's just the house complaining." The basement was humid, darker than usual. I followed the sound and the smell. The boiler was ancient, probably from the 70s, and the vent was half clogged with spiderwebs. But the real problem was the pressure gauge. It was creeping into the red. "Ma'am, has this ever gone out before?" I asked. "Years ago, my husband used to hit it with a broom handle." I smiled. "I won't do that, but I'll get it stable." I vented the system, bled off pressure, cleared the intake, gave the fan motor a temporary patch. When I came back upstairs, she handed me a cookie wrapped in a napkin. My late husband used to say, if a man can fix a boiler, he can raise a family. I took the cookie. "Thanks, Miss Geneva." Her eyes crinkled. "You got someone at home waiting on you?" "No, ma'am, just me." "Well," she said, patting my arm, "then maybe today this is your family." I didn't cry in her driveway, but I came close. By the afternoon, the weather had turned again, clear skies, high heat. The water had mostly receded, but the ground was soaked like a sponge. Mold warnings were going out. Someone started handing out respirators near the bus stop. I stopped by the hardware store, which was more like a scavenger hunt than a shopping trip. Most shelves were bare. No pumps, no hoses, no dehumidifiers. I managed to find a single can of expanding foam and a couple of pipe clamps. The clerk looked half asleep behind the counter. "You one of the guys doing house calls?" he asked as he rang me up. "Unofficially." He nodded, braver than me. That evening, I finally made time to check on my mom's place. She lived in a duplex 2 neighborhoods over higher elevation but older plumbing. She hadn't texted since Thursday. When I pulled up, I could already tell the porch had shifted. The wood swelled, creaked under my boots. Inside, she had towels lining the hallway, a mop leaning against the wall like a warning sign. "Hi, Ma," I said gently. She didn't scold me for taking 3 days. She just pointed to the hallway and said, "The back bathroom's making a noise like it's breathing." It was the air vent, backed up, waterlogged. I cleared it, then checked under the house for leaks. We sat at her kitchen table afterward, each with a mug of oversteeped tea. The fan buzzed above us. "I saw the Facebook thing," she said finally. "You're all over the neighborhood page." "Don't remind me." She smiled. "Your dad would have hated that." I snorted. "Yeah, too many people knowing his business." She tapped her mug. "But me, I'm proud." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. I got home at 9. My phone was dead, my feet were blistered, and my right knee was clicking every time I bent it. But the basement was dry, and my inbox had one new message. Subject: invoice. From Carol Zimmerman. "Hey Joe, just checking. Do you want us to pool some money and pay you for all your time? Happy to pass the hat around. Let me know what's fair." I stared at the screen for a long time. Because here was the truth. I hadn't billed a single person yet. I hadn't even thought about it. And now that I was being asked, I didn't know if I could. Would it change things? Would they start treating me like a contractor again instead of a neighbor? Would they stop waving? Would the lemon bars go away? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked to the shed, checked my gear, took stock of what I had left. Then I sat under the eave, watching the stars poke through the humid sky. And I told myself, tomorrow I'll decide. Tonight I just wanted to be Joe. Not Joe the plumber. Not Joe the hero. Just Joe. The invoice pad wasn't heavy, just honest. It sat on my workbench under a wrench and a roll of Teflon tape, untouched since before the flood. The top page was curled slightly at the edges, warped from the damp. I'd filled out a few before, back when jobs were clean, finite, billable. A clogged sink, a busted disposal, a leaky valve. This week had been different, messier, more human. And that little pad was staring at me like it was time to choose. Sunday morning came quietly. No rain, no wind, just the sound of neighborhood birds making cautious returns, chirping like they were checking for structural damage too. My own body felt like a bruised pipe, usable, but not without complaint. I made coffee, then stepped outside barefoot to test the concrete. Dry. Across the street, Aaron was hosing down his walkway. He saw me and raised a hand. I nodded back. A single silent exchange. Gratitude, respect, fatigue. All wrapped into one. I wasn't planning to work that day. But plans are luxuries people like me rarely get. At 9:20, I got a call from Sanjay, who lived in the gray house near the cul-de-sac, the one with the ceramic owl on the porch. "Hey Joe," he said, voice tight. "I hate to do this on a Sunday, but my brother's downstairs bathroom just started bubbling." I rubbed my eyes. Bubbling. Like air or gas or something, the toilet's breathing. That meant pressure, probably sewer gas, possibly dangerous. I told him I'd be there in 20. It turned out to be a blocked vent and partial backflow. Not a full emergency yet, but a few hours from becoming one. Sanjay and his brother watched me work like I was defusing a bomb. I snaked the line, replaced a faulty air admittance valve, taped up a joint that was starting to weep. When I stood up, my back popped like a glow stick. Sanjay handed me a folded envelope. "Just take it." I looked at it, then at him. "I didn't ask for it." "I know, but we would have been in serious trouble without you. You're not a charity." I held it for a second, thought about refusing. But I didn't. On my way home, I saw the first official city truck on our street. Yellow hazard lights, 2 workers in reflective vests packing around a drain with clipboards. Progress, I guess. Still 3 days too late. I got back to find a note taped to my door. "Joe, your mom said you were tired. I'm taking over Zone C today. Don't argue. Carol." Underneath it was a paper bag with a sandwich, a bottle of electrolyte water, and 2 fresh pairs of socks. I actually laughed. Real breath out your nose kind of laugh. I went inside and changed. Not into work clothes, just jeans and a clean t-shirt. I let myself sit. Not on the edge of the couch, not upright and ready for the next call. I let myself sit. Then the doorbell rang. This time it was Doug, the guy from across the street whose basement I'd drained on day one. He was holding a clipboard and a plastic grocery bag. "Hey man," he said, "I've been making rounds, got a list of everyone you helped. I thought it might be time we talked about, money." I opened the door a little wider. He stepped in, handed me the clipboard. There were 15 names on it, next to each, a dollar amount, nothing crazy, modest estimates probably based on labor hours and parts. "We figured we'd each chip in based on what you did," Doug said. "I know you didn't ask, but we don't want to be the kind of people who only call you when we're desperate and then forget when it's dry again." I scanned the list. Rachel, Sanjay, Tyson's grandma, even Aaron. Doug cleared his throat. "You can cross anyone off if you want, but we'd feel better if you took it." Inside the bag, cash envelopes labeled neat handwriting. Some had notes attached. "Thank you for treating us like neighbors first. You were there before the city. This isn't payment, it's acknowledgement." I swallowed hard. "You organized this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Nah, Carol did." Of course she did. That afternoon, I finally replied to her email. "Carol, I appreciate the gesture, truly. I've decided to accept what people choose to give, but I'm not nomming a price. If anyone asks how to pay me, tell them the work was a neighbor helping neighbors. If they insist, I'll take it, but no invoices. And please, for the love of God, no more Facebook posts about me. Joe." At 4:30, I got a text from Aaron. "You still got that rusted snake with the broken crank? I want to learn how to use it." I replied, "Yeah, why? Figured I'd help next time if there's a next time." "There will be. Then teach me." I agreed. We made plans for Wednesday. That night, I took the invoice pad from the workbench. I didn't throw it out. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened to a fresh page, wrote in block letters. "Flood week, no charge, just community." Then I set it back down, covered it with the roll of tape again, and went to make myself dinner. Sometimes I wonder if I let myself be forgotten on purpose. It's easier that way, quiet, undisturbed. You fix what's broken, go home, close the door. No one expects anything. No one owes you anything. But that week proved me wrong. And I think I needed it more than I realized. By Monday, the worst of it was over. The water was gone, the pumps were quiet, the air smelled like wet earth and plywood dust. Everyone was exhausted, but something had shifted on our street. Not just in the infrastructure, in the people. Marvin waved at me from the end of his driveway, his hand still wrapped in a brace from digging out gutters. Carol dropped off a laminated map titled "Drainage Risk Points Updated." Tyson's grandma, Miss Geneva, sent me a voicemail saying the boiler was behaving, but with attitude. Even the city sent out a repair crew, finally. They were working 2 blocks down where a cracked main had collapsed part of the street. But here, we'd already done most of the work ourselves. I spent that morning helping Aaron dig out the sump pit in his garage. He showed up in jeans, gloves, and a bandana tied around his head like he was going to war with moisture. "All right," I said, handing him my old rusted drain snake. "Step 1, don't let go of this thing once it starts spinning." He looked at it like it might bite him. I taught him the basics: snake angle, pipe listening, pressure balancing. After an hour, he was sweating like he'd run a marathon. "I don't know how you do this every day," he said, winded. "I've been sitting behind a screen for years and this kicked my ass." "Welcome to plumbing," I said, smirking. "Most of the job is staying calm while things go wrong." He laughed, then paused. "Thanks for letting me help," he said. "I mean that." "No problem," I said, and I meant it. Because teaching someone, that's trust, that's passing something on. And after this week, I'd realized how few people actually know what it means to show up and stay when things get wet and real and messy. The next 2 days, I went house by house, not to fix anything, just to check in. At Doug's place, the basement had finally dried, and his daughter had painted a cartoon thank you sign with a pipe wrench that had muscles. At Rachel's, she'd replaced the warped mailbox with one that had my last name spelled right on a card tucked inside. At Sanjay's, he insisted I take back the envelope. I refused. We compromised, I fixed a leaking faucet, and he gave me a plate of homemade samosas instead. That's how it should be. Not a transaction. A connection. By Thursday, the neighborhood looked almost normal again. Grass browning from the sun, trash trucks taking bags of memories away, kids riding bikes through puddles that had finally stopped spreading. And then something happened I didn't expect. I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real, honest-to-God envelope in the mailbox. No return address, just my name handwritten in neat cursive. Inside was a single note. I don't know you well, but I watched. You showed up when no one else did. Not all heroes wear capes. Some carry pipe cutters. Thank you for reminding us what community looks like. A neighbor. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into the back of my invoice pad. Right behind the page that said Flood Week, no charge. That weekend, I was back in my garage replacing a faucet cartridge when Mom showed up. She knocked once, then let herself in. Thought you might need groceries, she said, setting down 2 paper bags. I wiped my hands on a rag. You didn't have to. I know, she said, but you're the guy who doesn't ask, and I didn't raise a son who forgets to give back. I leaned against the bench. You think Dad would have done the same? She smiled faintly. Your dad would have complained the whole time, but yes, he would have shown up, then bragged about it for a decade. We both laughed. Then she said, you okay? And for the first time all week I said, yeah, I think I am. Later that night I sat out on the front steps. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles after a storm when you know something been shaken loose but what's left feels stronger for it. I watched porch lights flicker on one by one, heard the faint hum of air conditioning units and the buzz of cicadas. Someone a few houses down strummed a guitar badly but confidently. And across the street, Aaron was messing with his hose again, trying to fix a pressure leak I knew was just a bad gasket. I let him figure it out. He waved, I waved back. Before I went inside, I checked the shed one more time. Tools cleaned, pump coiled, boots dry at last. Then I walked over to the old workbench and opened the invoice pad. Pulled out the note from the anonymous neighbor. Pinned it to the wall above the bench. And underneath it, I wrote in black marker. This is why. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.